Anytime you're ready.
All right. So thanks for joining us today to the Get Rich Slowly podcast. We have Adrian Schermer today.
Hello.
Hey, and myself, Rob Delavan. And we wanted to share with you guys our Get Rich Slowly concept. And there's a few different steps on that. Our goal is to be able to just take the things that we do every single day with our clients and that are actually over time building wealth through real estate and try to emulate them. What do they say, Adrian? The 5 people that are closest around you are who you become, or who you are.
Yeah.
So you try to basically be that virtual presence for you to be able to do that, as we're doing that and mentoring people and then of course mentoring us. The 4 basic comments or concepts are: number 1, to get rich slowly, you do have to save.
Mm-hmm.
Number 2, you do want to own or need to own real estate instead of rent. We have probably 20 podcasts just on that.
Yep.
Number 3, you do have to play the tax game.
Yes.
It's not optional. And there's a number of different things that we can do there, and a lot of professional help that you'll need. And number 4, you put numbers 1 through 3 together and strategic planning. And at the end of the day, if this is done correctly, or the end of a working life and an income curve from 20 to 50, you start talking to people who are retiring at 50 instead of 65, which
Absolutely.
is a dream. But the way you get to a dream is you have goals and you benchmark those.
Absolutely.
So,
And I would say this is not a rigid machine. We are going to be giving advice and tips that can be used in any combination. You can pick 5 of the 10 things we say. There may be ways to squeeze every last drop out of it here, but there are many different ways, I would say, to achieve the same end result of having more money at the end of a period of time than you would have. It's just
right.
it's proactive planning, and it's looking at the people who, Rob, I know that you, in our conversations, have said you've had the same experience. We've talked to tons of people who look back and go, man, I wish I would have done this or that, especially the successful ones. Arguably, the people who have had the most success have the most to draw back on and go, I could have done this sooner. I could have taken on, this wasn't as risky as I thought it was going to be. And we want to kind of peel back kind of the old rules of thumb that don't really work anymore. A lot has changed since your parents or your grandparents bought a house. So we shouldn't follow those rules anymore. Why would we follow the same rules back when interest rates were 15% as we do when they're 3%? You wouldn't. That'd be crazy. So we're gonna look at some stuff that really maybe in the last 5, at most 10 years have been, have really shifted the math on how this stuff works out and how you can use it to your favor rather than using maybe some old financial advice that that just doesn't apply anymore.
Exactly. And in doing so, we're going to enjoy ourselves.
Yes.
We may from time to time ask our audience to share a glass of whiskey or a beer with us. We may be a bit irreverent. We're going to probably rate this podcast at maybe a PG-13, give or take. So, the 12-year-olds, we'll let the parents be the judge of whether you can listen to us. And
if they're ready to learn about investing and avoiding taxes in a responsible manner.
The whole concept of, the shit they don't teach in school is a core value of ours.
Yeah, I didn't learn any of this in economics class.
Exactly.
And I wish I did.
I wish. Exactly.
Holy cow.
So the first point that I'm going to throw at you, Adrian, and I want you to expand on it, is just the concept of, obviously you got to start somewhere. And, we might have a 22-year-old listener that's straight out of college and has a ton of student loan debt and is making $16 an hour, as a barista. Nothing against baristas. There's some amazing ones out there.
Absolutely.
But sees no hope in the future. The concept of, you do have to save, you have to start somewhere. Expand on that a little bit more.
Sure. And I think there's, to that point, there's a mantra out there right now. We see these articles all the time, right? Millennials are the generation they're picking on, but even Gen Z, probably more Gen Z right now, is getting lied to because they're being told millennials were already inheriting a poisoned earth with no opportunities. Meanwhile, I'm talking to millennials, and then, I have these aha conversations. You probably have them all the time too, Rob, where people go, I didn't think I could do this, now, let alone that I could have done this 5 years ago and gotten myself started, because people told me it's impossible. People told me you can't buy a house on such and such salary, or you can't do it with this or that. I'm not saying a $16 an hour worker is going to go and buy a $500,000 house in downtown Portland necessarily, but I think there's a lot more opportunity than people make it out to be. And what I'm seeing a lot of particularly is that people kind of want to buy maybe almost like their parents' house. They don't want to step down. The starter home kind of became less popular for a little while. People looked at it as maybe a waste of money because they're used to other things in their life that depreciate. They're used to, well, I bought a starter car and I sold it for a tenth of what I got it for, and I put all those payments in and it was a waste of money because I only got $500 when I turned it in at the dealership. The reality is even the not so good investments, like, people tend to look down on some condos or smaller homes or more rural areas, are the stepping stones that build people into the greater degree of wealth that we're talking about. And the recurring theme for me is, we talk to people who have multi-million-dollar portfolios and we ask them, what do you wish you had done differently? And universally, one of the concepts they touch on is, I wish I had started sooner. I wish I hadn't believed what had been told to me. And I wish I didn't wait until I matched whatever that magical goal number is, 20% down so you don't pay mortgage insurance, or a credit score of 780 so that you get the best interest rate on your debt. Because, hey, it's a 30-year mortgage. Newsflash, almost no one spends 30 years paying that mortgage. Whatever it is, all these core concepts that revolve around kind of these rules of thumb that have just gone out the window. When rates were 15%, they probably made a lot of sense. Pay that mortgage down as fast as you can. Now we're borrowing at 3%, and homes in the Portland area are appreciating at, what would you say, Rob, last few years?
Well, in the last 10 years, it's been 6%. And depending on the year, it can be higher than that. So
great.
You're leaving a lot on the table there. One of the things that I would say, and we'll talk about this, and again, we'll probably do an entire podcast on it, but if you're living below your means, you're being a saver, you're looking at this stuff from, hey, I want to buy that. I want to buy that piece of real estate. And you are that $16 an hour employee to start. That's okay. Because I'm telling you right now, as somebody who employs people, Adrian, you're the same way, that if that $16 an hour employee shows up every single day, works their ass off and gives 100% and actually sits down with me as their boss or their manager below me, or whoever it is, and says, hey, my goal is to buy a house in the next 16 months or 18 months, whatever it is. And I need to get from where I'm at now to $24 an hour. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's do that. And
absolutely.
If they're killing it and they're showing up every single day and working their asses off again, guess what? There's a pathway to do that almost anywhere. You could work at Starbucks, and I would expect that within a year or two, you're the assistant manager or the manager if you're there soaking it up, saying yes to everything. So I don't want to get too far down that path, because I think there's going to be some people that we're going to bring on an interview with some firsthand stories about that.
Tons to unpack.
But rising through the ranks, that sort of thing, that's number one. So number two, so you've already talked about it a bit, but own real estate instead of rent. And this concept of, I'm not going to buy yet, or I'm not ready to buy yet, and buying as soon as possible. So these are lies we tell ourselves that hold us back. A lot of us, we have our peers, and it's all very interesting is, usually that 30-year-old or 32-year-old that has the one kid, they've been married for a few years, obviously 50 years ago, people got married and had kids earlier in life. We had the whole millennial generation that, lived with their parents until they were 25.
Yeah.
I mean, again, no judgment. It doesn't really matter, but this concept of,
those are often some of the, that's a leg up. There's nothing wrong with that right now.
Exactly. Do it. Like,
avoid
I
rent.
think it's awesome.
Yeah.
So speak to, obviously home appreciation and that lost opportunity cost around 6% a year. But let's say you're making 6% a year, because that's what we've been experiencing the last 10 years.
Yeah.
And it's been a great bull market for real estate as a whole. But let's say you only put, $10,000 down on that purchase, right?
Right.
3%.
Right.
And
Instead of waiting for that 20%,
instead of waiting,
like a lot of people do.
We'll run scenarios and we'll do whole podcasts on this, but 6% on $300,000 over 10 years, that's roughly 60%, just doing simple math. Okay. Now your 300 is worth, what would that be? 420 if I did my math right?
5 years, you're at 401. It's going to take you one more year. 6th year, you're at 425. But let's roll back. 5 years, $100,000. We talk about that number all the time. How long does it take to save $100,000? Well, if I want to save $100,000 in 5 years, I need to put aside rent on a 4-bedroom apartment, a 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom apartment in the Portland metro. I need to save almost $1,700 a month.
There we go.
That's a huge chunk of change. How do you save $100,000? You buy a house that's going to appreciate $100,000 within 5 years. That's the fastest way to save $100,000 in 5 years.
And pay a mortgage.
And that's going to be, I think, one of the core concepts that we will bring as real estate professionals. And then we will bring in other professionals rather than speculating on other fields. We're going to bring in other experts in their fields, and let you gain and glean from their knowledge. But I think at the core of it here, this is, a real estate investing podcast. And then we're going to expand on all the different ways that you can make real estate work for you.
Right.
Real estate's a business. it's an equity gaining piece of property, which is a rarity for almost anything anyone owns. Most of the stuff we own depreciates. We lose money on it historically. You've got to look at property differently than your car payment or your credit card or some installment debt that you use to pay off your credit card. You've got to see the bigger picture. And I think, Rob, we've talked about this experience. We've had dozens and dozens of times. We meet those people, they buy that first house, and that's the first point the ticker goes positive. That's where your net value goes up. You talked about a $300,000 home, which is pretty moderate. That's an average in a lot of places. A gain of 6% is $18,000. Once you buy a house that's worth $300,000 in our area, you start making an extra $18,000 a year.
Right. And your down payment was
income isn't just your paycheck.
15, exactly. And you didn't have to borrow 100 to get it. So I'll stop there because I want to go to number 3.
Yes. And
that is playing the tax and retirement game, which tax and retirement are like this. There's a couple points here to make, and we'll dig into it much more in depth. We'll have multiple podcasts about this also with CPA, financial planner, and so on, and leveraging the best professionals. But the concept of investments and paying a minimal amount of tax, for example, let's say you make that $50,000 a year, you can save with the 401k match and all of that sort of thing with your employer and get 50, 70, 80% or more just on your first 5% of your income.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a no-brainer. It's basically free money. If you do that and you start in your 20s, and we'll dive into it, but every dollar that you save into a 401k is a dollar less that you're being taxed on. So you could, if you were to, this is kind of crazy example, but if you had made $50,000 a year and you wanted to be taxed like a person who makes $30,000 a year, you pay a lot less tax that way. You would just put basically 20K into the retirement accounts. And I probably here is the appropriate time to make the caveat: we are not tax professionals, we're not financial advisors.
Absolutely. So, but we will bring on tax professionals, and we will bring on tax advisors, and you'll get to use their information for free.
Exactly. And that's awesome. But just the concept of every dollar you save in paying tax legally can then be used to grow your net worth, your financial little nest egg. And it starts out little, but over time, man, that can add up quickly.
Yeah. And it's
So
by design. We're not going to teach you how to cheat the system or uh, work some sort of magic loophole. This
right,
isn't, how to open an offshore account. Maybe we'll have a podcast on that, but this isn't, we're not trying to cheat anything. This is by design. The government
yep,
wants you to save money in your retirement. So they build a system to allow you to do that.
right,
Similarly, if you could have pulled $100,000 out of your business, but you chose to pay yourself 50 and then reinvest that money. The government isn't taxing you on that money because they want you to do that. They want you to invest in the economy. They want
right,
your business to grow. So these aren't strategies that we are trying to cheat or steal our way to the top. These are genuinely using proven financial strategies and looking at it in the modern financial times where, like I said, we've got 3% rates. We've got homes that are appreciating pretty rapidly in metro areas, but not in an unusual way. We're not in a bubble. We're not seeing 3/4 of double-digit growth like you would see.
right,
That's a real estate bubble. What
right,
we're seeing is a natural progression and a reaction to one of the only core concepts that economics in school taught me, which was, supply and demand. There's a finite amount of houses, there's a finite amount of land, and they are making people like gangbusters right now. So
and we're not
that
making any more
means
dirt.
we're not making dirt. No, not a whole
Exactly.
lot of it anyway. We're not making a whole lot of land, except for some limited kooky examples out there. So what does that mean? How much Portland is there to go around? A finite amount, right?
Right,
They can increase the city circle, but at the end of the day, these are still plots of land that have existed forever. They were farms at once, and now they're $500,000 condos. So, how do you get in as soon as possible? Because we know development is inevitable. We know that cities continue to grow, and we have plenty of examples from around the globe of that. And as long as you have a diverse economy like you do in Portland and many other metro areas, you have the
mhm,
ability to invest, to get in, borrow money to do so, and then just make sure that you're flowing cash positive.
right,
And Rob, we
and
talk about risk a bit. I'd like to fold into that. What if I
yeah,
have a $2,500 mortgage payment and then something happens? I lose my job and I can't pay it.
right, and that's the 2007 nightmare that
Mhm.
we still have some PTSD as a culture from that.
Yeah,
2007 through 2010 when it
it's a
kind of bottomed
valid
out
fear.
and so on. Exactly. And it's totally valid. And I have this conversation. I don't know how many times I've said this, but I always want what I learned from 2007 was I want an exit strategy on every piece of property that I own. But there's a couple pieces here. That doesn't mean the exit strategy that everybody did and went broke doing, which was short selling their home or foreclosing and living for free for a little while.
Yeah,
Those are both loser propositions. When I mean exit
very
strategy, I mean
expensive. Yeah.
what would you do in the situation where we had a market correction, which we
Mhm.
will have at some point sooner than later? It might happen a year or two from now. It might happen next month. It might be 5 years. Who knows? But, and we'll go into market drivers and all of these other things. But an exit strategy to me on a property means, hey, it's a property that I've owned. I currently have a mortgage on it. The payment's $2,500 a month. It's
Mhm.
a fixed rate mortgage. Yes, taxes and insurance will go up a little bit every year, but not much. We know exactly that 3 years from now, it's going to be 2,700 a month payment because of taxes and insurance. But the mortgage is going to stay the same. So can I rent that house for that cost or more? And what do rents do over time? Always up.
Always up.
What do fixed rate mortgages do for 30 years if you only make the minimum payment? Stay exactly the same.
Yep.
So in a scenario where I'm walking through with clients and they're giving me this concern of, hey, what happens if I lose that job? What happens if this or that? I jokingly say, just to get the attention, but I really do, is you go live under a bridge and you
Yeah.
let your tenants pay your payments, make your payments, your monthly obligations. And you don't have to sell that house. And you know what? I guarantee you, 10 years from now, rents will be higher. The mortgage and payments are going to be roughly the same. And you're going to be really glad you didn't screw up your credit for 7 years by having a foreclosure or a short sale, which is what, 3 to 5 years that it screws up your credit. There's different rules. We won't go down that rabbit hole today.
Sure.
But you have an exit strategy. And that is a huge, huge piece. And when we're talking about going back to play the tax and retirement game, we're saying that you're going to have this asset that appreciates regardless of the time frame that you're going to be, that you may have your ups and downs in your income, but over decades, you're building wealth.
Yeah, yeah. And I won't break into it too deep, but I will say too, don't forget the other option is rent. And people who couldn't pay their rent faced some pretty difficult problems this year. In 2020, we saw it. I watched a lot of people step into forbearance and step right back out of it.
Right.
It's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy, but when we compare, these worst case scenarios, yeah, you probably can rent your property, especially 5 years into ownership. You can probably rent it cash positive, at least break even on your mortgage, even if you didn't put a lot down. And we'll get into the minutia of this. It's something that you should think about when you buy, but either way, if you lose your job, you are going to be in a tough position. It's nice to know that there is some equity to potentially lean on. That worst case, if you had to sell, you do have something that you get out of the equation to help float you. Or maybe you rent it and then you can get yourself back into it someday.
Right. So, and that folds into the tax and retirement game nicely.
Yeah.
The last piece of our get rich slowly concept is that strategic planning. And that really comes into play, yes, at the very beginning, at least conceptually. But once you have assets to play with, say you do have those 1 or 2 rental properties or that primary home with a ton of equity, you do that refi, you have your tax situation in place, you're saving that 20-25% that the financial planners say that you should. You have a established CPA instead of TurboTax, a whole nother podcast. But once you have all that in place, what I'm really talking about is you're forming a dream team that is probably going to be with you for life, or at least they should be. And these are highly trusted individuals. This is your CPA, your financial planner, your mortgage broker, your real estate broker, your life insurance agent, your bookkeeper, all of those. There's more and more and more. But all of your attorney, your estate planning, I mean, there's so much that you will have in place, and you want to have the best of the best. And when we're interviewing our respective guests, we're going to be asking the question is, hey, how do I know that somebody is the top of their industry? You got to work with the best people. And in this day and age, with so much just mass garbage being floated to us with, through whether it be social media or the traditional media, or the uneducated, person, that uncle that always gives you advice unsolicited, whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's this concept of you put the team together, you have a strategy, and your dreams, if you put goals to dreams, you'll hit them, and then you're going to dream even more. And that's what becomes a lot of fun. But it all comes back to this whole concept of get rich slowly. If you're a 30-year-old and you're starting on this process, where are you going to be at when you're 40, when you're 50, when you're 60? God forbid you're sitting around hoping that Social Security benefits go up, right?
Yeah. And if you're listening to this and you're hearing Rob say these things and you're thinking estate planning, a lawyer, these are things I don't need. These are for rich people. These are for wealthy people. All of these people will say the same thing to you. I wish I had gotten one sooner. I wish I'd gotten a financial planner sooner. I wish I had these conversations sooner. Talking to an expert like Rob, talking to someone like me, it doesn't necessarily even cost you any money up front to begin this planning process. And the surprise, this is one of my favorite things about working in this field, is just helping people reach that aha moment that this is not something that's only for your parents or people that you picture above. We all have that kind of moment when we grow up, right? Where we think, am I actually an adult yet? Or, when do I start feeling like an adult? I thought that was supposed to happen when I reached my 20s or my 30s or whatever it is. You've got to accept that you're an adult. You've got this power. If you're out of high school, you're there, man. And it's never too soon to start these planning steps. We'll bring in some experts so that you can get the advice free to get you started. But we'll make a pretty strong case for why people do pay these experts so much money. Why is this such a successful field? Why do lawyers get paid as much as they do? The answer is they're worth it. And we'll explain why and help you get to the point where it saves you money to spend this money.
Right. I'm looking forward to this journey, Adrian. We're going to talk to
Me
a lot
too.
of people that are way smarter than we are.
Way
And
smarter. Yeah, absolutely.
hopefully, you said the aha moment. I call it the damn it, or son of a bitch.
Yeah.
I wish I would have known that.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
that sort of thing. But we'll have fun while we do it. And I'm looking forward to this process. Hopefully, we can bring so much value to our audience that will, I don't know, someday have a get rich slowly convention or something like that. So
Yeah.
that'll be fun. I'm looking forward to it.
Same. Thank you all for joining us.
Appreciate it. And we'll see you next time.
See you next week.